And we're live. Hello and good afternoon, 1 p.m. on a Sunday. Guess what? Today is Father's Day. It's Father's Day for me, and I'm sure it's Father's Day for many people that are joining me today. Happy day. Fascinating, wonderful experience being a father, and I am thankful to my wife and family that they are interested in me doing things like this, and I have a couple of minutes to spend some time with people that are interested in knowledge and information on a gray, gloomy day for a Sunday and a Father's Day. Gabrielle says, "Live long and prosper." Dare I? Yes. I wish that for everyone, and that plays into the topics that I'd like to talk about today. The one topic that I didn't get to talk about yesterday was the search for yield. And the vote for today's topic was financial freedom. So those two play very nicely together. Financial freedom, more so, is a philosophical concept in many regards that will lead into the search for yield, which is a means of achieving financial freedom. So let's start with financial freedom. So clearly, there's two components to that phrase, financial and freedom. So don't be confused with physical freedom, but the common denominator is freedom. Financial freedom is real freedom. So freedom, what is freedom? Freedom, fundamentally, whether it's freedom physical or freedom financial, is freedom of choice. The freedom to choose A or B, left or right, yes or no. Think, especially on Father's Day, of children. When a child is told no, it does not react well. Biologically, they don't have necessarily a freedom of choice because they're going through and experiencing learning experiences about how to make the best decisions possible. So the freedom of choice is everything. And it's a philosophical concept that goes back to the great philosophers that I could probably reference in great detail if I did some due diligence. Everyone is searching for the freedom of choice, and this is the fundamental premise behind physical freedom as well, the freedom of choice to do something or not do something, to go somewhere or not go somewhere. And the same applies to financial freedom as well. Do I have to wake up tomorrow morning to earn an income, to pay my bills, merely to wake up in the morning? And if you don't have that choice, you don't have financial freedom. I myself currently am not financially free, as well as the vast majority of the population of the planet, 99.99% of persons. Now, don't get me wrong, financial freedom does not entail a person does not want to work. I sure as hell want to work, but I want to work on the things I want to work on. I want that freedom of choice. And the second that choice is taken away from someone, the innate primal instinct that we all know children experience and we still experience as adults because we were children, occurs. It is being suppressed. We are being suppressed of a choice. And in the best way I could probably describe it is it's painful to be deprived of choice. And it's not to be diminished or to think one is entitled to financial freedom. Oh, the lucky few wealthy get it. No, the pursuit of financial freedom is the pursuit of freedom. And that's should be a movement. And I think it is at the heart of most movements. People want the choice. They want freedom of choice. And okay, so financial freedom, yay, that's what we all want. Told everyone who was going to get a little bit philosophical, but that is what it means to be or at least attempt to achieve financial freedom, and why we want it so bad. Because of the philosophical concept of choice, yes or no, left or right, and do we actually get to make that decision or not? How do we attempt to achieve it is why we're all involved with cryptocurrencies or the equities markets or whatever diversified investment portfolio someone has created or crafted or thought of. An attempt to strategically position oneself to achieve financial freedom, financial independence. I like freedom better. Freedom is a powerful word. And if you don't have the freedom of choice, you do not have financial freedom. And anyway, whatever. That's quite emotional because it's frustrating because I sure as hell know almost everyone that ever will listen to me has to wake up, because they're not free to make that choice to wake up when they want to wake up and do what they want to do when they want to do it, do what kind of work they want to do what kind of business they want to do. Well, that gets complicated. I don't know about business because that involves probably like debt and borrowing and a more strategic choice. But at minimum, anyway, at minimum freedom. So cryptocurrencies, the search for yield. We talked about some very nice things yesterday, and I didn't get to the search for yield, but the search for yield I've talked about in other videos. But that is what's happening right now in DeFi land and cryptocurrency, in the cryptocurrency space. And what is the search for yield? It is the same story, the same exact thing that has happened to the global financial system for the last 50 years since coming off the gold standard in 1971, the Nixon shock. Leveraged debt. So debt isn't necessarily a bad thing. Debt allows leverage. Leverage allows for doing things one could not necessarily do with just the amount of assets they currently have. Debt allows for growth. What's meaningful is rational debt, or at least safe debt, or consuming debt reasonably. That's probably the best statement I could say. Now, the traditional banking system is filled with what's called under collateralized debt. If you get a mortgage on a house, you have to put down 5%, 10, 20%. Some mortgages, 0%. That is an under collateralized debt position. When a person defaults on that debt, the lender takes on the burden. And the same thing, especially with CDOs, and that's what happened in 2008 and 9. The mortgages were packaged into collateralized debt obligations, which were basically bundles of mortgages. So the debt was leveraged to create these crazy derivative instruments, leveraged, what was it, 10, 100 times to 1. And when the mortgages failed, the debt positions spiraled and collapsed like a house of cards, because all the risk was on the lender because they were under collateralized debt positions. So this is absolutely fascinating what's going on, and I've talked about it on Twitter. Well, sometimes it's better said verbally, and that's why we're doing these YouTube vids. DeFi is over collateralized debt positions. Under collateralized versus over collateralized. Seems kind of simple, but it's not. What's the difference? Difference is the person who wants the debt position is doing the same thing. They're still leveraging their asset to have more than they typically would have had with just the asset. But now it's an over collateralized position. So in the case of a default scenario, the collateral is liquidated to make the debt position whole. The burden is placed on the borrower. Legacy system, under collateralized, the burden is on the lender. DeFi, over collateralized, the burden is on the borrower. What's the difference? The difference is when the defaults happen, when the debt isn't The debt is defaulted on. The system isn't jeopardized. This is the way to do the system. DeFi has, well, at least what we just realized it in the last couple of weeks, but this has probably been in development for probably about 2 years at this point. I'll get to that, friends. But this is what's happening right now. The people are realizing that leverage debt positions is possible in DeFi. Maybe it was just comp that kind of triggered the mass realization and this firestorm, because this thing is a rocket ship and I don't see it stopping. I see it spiraling. I see more IGOs, initial governance offerings, which is probably a topic for another conversation, an entire conversation. But this is gonna go. This is like the ICO craze. This is what's happening right now. Over-collateralized debt positions do not place systemic risk on this leveraged debt DeFi lending system. So even if there's defaults, the system will remain functional. Maybe the governments around the world should have actually done something right instead of being greedy to expand and grow beyond their means, accepting these under-collateralized, almost 0% debt positions. 0% mortgages. What a ridiculous reality. So the legacy system, everyone is well aware that I think it's overwhelmingly pathetic. I'm disturbed that it's still functional. It is toxic, irrational. It's like, let's think of the worst design ever and do it. And then when it breaks, let's do it even worse. That's what's going on with the legacy financial system right now. The worst possible thing anyone could ever think of. Anyway, so that is what it is. I obviously the people involved with it are intelligent, but that's what they've created, and it's pathetic. So I don't think what's happening in DeFi is pathetic. It is real, and it breaks down to the analysis that I have provided. An under-collateralized debt-based system versus an over-collateralized debt-based system. DeFi is not susceptible to systemic disruption, and that's profound. Means perpetuity. It's kind of like critical mass decentralization. Ensures perpetuity of the UTXO blockchain, like Digibyte, has reached critical mass decentralization. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here. Critical mass. So I think that's what's occurring with DeFi. So the search for yield, there's some really crazy stuff going on with comp. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. There's no. You need big money to get the leverage in order to get the comp, but the comp is like I don't trust its valuation, because when this unwinds, when this is a bubble, the comp bubble, when it unwinds, that valuation on comp is going to come down. And what happens when it comes down? That means it's potentially a sequence of events that causes the over-collateralized debt positions that people are taking on to not be paid, which triggers liquidations, which triggers massive loss. But that's the way the system is designed to work. The risk versus reward analysis, people are taking on these over-collateralized debt positions, searching for yield, knowing most of the time, probably most of the time, these people, they're so green and brand new, they don't know the risk that they're taking, but they're going to get liquidated. But there's no risk to the system. Aave, Compound, whatever, whoever's doing the lending, Maker, there's no jeopardy. The system is not susceptible. They're not the ones lending. It's an over-collateralized position. And that's cool. That's awesome. And that's the way the legacy financial system, I wish it worked, but whatever. This is why we're building something new and better. So just because Compound isn't touchable, at least per my opinion, there's countless other ways to search for yield. So what are the liquidity pools doing? They're facilitating the interoperability between various asset classes. The more interesting ones, and frankly the one that's on fire, is Curve, which is stablecoins, or at least equally valued assets. And that means there's little to zero slippage. Slippage is when, let's say you own Ethereum and Maker, and people are piling into Maker. So your so your Maker position, people are buying Maker. So the Maker position, the quantity in the pool is decreasing, but then Maker shoots up 10x. You have your pool is skewed towards Ethereum, so you lose out on all those gains, and that's what's an impermanent loss. So I think there's a huge amount to gain in Kyber Network, Uniswap, but be careful of impermanent losses. And impermanent losses will occur when there's a lot of volatility. If a coin goes very parabolic, that's going to be a massive volatility event, and a lot of permanent losses will be incurred. Uh, Bancor is their Bancor V2. They're touting the solution to impermanent loss, which is awesome, absolutely fascinating. Balancer talks about mitigating or minimizing the risk associated with impermanent losses and asset volatility, which is really cool. I think placing relatively, so you own assets. Folks own assets, and the assets are relatively dormant. And the search for yield, the purpose of that phrase is to take assets that are relatively dormant and sitting and using them to produce yield. Having an asset appreciate in value is something that everyone wants, but that is not going to achieve your financial freedom. Turning $1,000 into $10,000 will not achieve financial freedom. Period. Ever. You need recurring revenue, and that is what the search for yield is. You think a pension fund that has $500 billion is looking for an epic 2x gain, 10x gain? No, they're looking for yield. The whole world is based on this word, yield. And that's why what's happening in DeFi is crazy, because it's exactly what the world does with the financial system. And once everyone realizes that what's happening in DeFi is better than the garbage these people have been doing for the last 50 years, it's going to be what everyone wants to do. It's going to be a FOMO. You'll have your bubbles, but at least with this implementation, the system is not in jeopardy in case of a default. Crazy. So the liquidity pools Curve is probably the most interesting right now until Bancor comes out with V2. And Kyber, their new protocol upgrade, is absolutely fascinating. It's deflationary. It's going to be incentivized, which encourages staking, which is the locking up of KNC, which decreases supply. So the burning decreases supply, the staking decreases supply. So there's a substantial supply restriction. And the other component of the protocol upgrade is incentives to the large, however they manage their large liquidity provider, the liquidity sources, and that is for marketing and integrations. So they're encouraging demand. The whole protocol upgrade is designed around encouraging demand and restricting supply. Whoa. I might be the most bullish about Kyber. I wonder what they think about permanent losses, because clearly that's something to consider. But that it has nothing to do with the service. That has to do with the risk reward of the lender. Maybe lenders don't necessarily care about. Lenders are interested in revenue. They're not interested in 10x gains. They're interested in predictable revenue, yield. A constant fixed 5% is more interesting than chasing a 10x gain. A constant fixed 10%. You can't get 10%. predictably in the traditional financial system. You'd be taking on a lot of risk. But these liquidity pools are producing this yield based on transaction fees. So it's a very fascinating, potentially consistent revenue stream. The yield can be predictable. So these pools are crazy. I like all of them. Interestingly enough, the only pools I really shy away from right now are USDT. I don't trust it at all. I think that is an issue waiting to happen. I think there's just too much heat on whatever it is they're doing or not doing or saying or not saying. I don't trust it, and that is a risk reward analysis. And everyone has to make their own analysis for themselves. Sure, throw a bunch in the SUSD pool on Curve, and you're going to, it was like 30% APR right now, and an extra 20% in SNX incentives. It's a it's ridiculous yield. Bear in mind those are daily APY values. If you average it out, which the Curve has their stats page, it's a much more lower normal expected value. But if you look at the average, for instance, averages their stats page, the SBTC page, SBTC chart, I think it's 14%. You guys realize that means on average you're making 14% on Bitcoin that was typically sitting collecting dust in a wallet. This changes everything. And I've talked about it briefly, and I probably should talk about it more. This changes everything. Once this system, once this sequence of events, this cycle, this service, this functionality proves itself as reliable, predictable, stable, and functional, why would miners choose to liquidate Bitcoin miners? Their Bitcoin one time and it's gone. They never have that Bitcoin ever again. Or they could accumulate Bitcoin, getting 5, 10, 15% yield on their Bitcoin, which is a growing, increasing revenue stream. So I think in the next 3, 4, 5, however many years, I don't think in terms of years, I think in terms of inevitabilities. I think that is possibly an inevitability. There's no reason to liquidate. You want recurring revenue streams. Anyway, so Franz says, how many projects should you save in? Save, not invest. Save. And I've talked about this in other videos. I won't get into it at this point in time, but I would say you have to make an assessment and you have to achieve a feeling that if the projects you are in are too many, and if one of them goes 10x, is that going to change things? So if you got 10 projects and one of them goes 10x, compared to if you have 3 projects and one of them goes 10x, that changes everything. It's a meaningful difference. What does that mean? That means you have to think about what the hell you're doing with regard to portfolio balance. Now, bear in mind, this is spreading, you spread too thin. If you go too concentrated, maybe you miss something. So this is a risk reward analysis. There's risk in that. If there's risk in spreading too thin, you're too diversified, you're not going to get bang for your buck. If you go too concentrated, there's risk in that, because then you might miss something that goes while what you own doesn't. There's no, not rhyme or reason, but there's no prescription for exactly what to do. But everyone needs to do it for themselves, because in the end, everyone has to feel comfortable with their choices and live with their choices. These are the things I think about every day when I look at the assets that I possess. I am tempted to own things. I do not own things that I want to own. Think about that one for a second. I want to own Bancor. I want to own 0x. I want to own MakerDAO. I want to own Link. I want to own Unibright. I don't own any of them. I could. I choose not to. That's meaningful. And that is a choice, and that is a tough choice. Buy 1,000,000 units of sub-penny projects. Well, it's complicated. The risk reward, that's max risk, max reward. Look, a great example of max risk, max reward is Melon, MLN. Is basically DeFi ETFs. Straight up, it's a DeFi ETF. The same type of ETF you would do if you went on the Fidelity or whatever, Charles Schwab E-Trade. It's a DeFi ETF. But it has a very relatively low market cap. Melon is quite fascinating, has a huge potential. It's a DeFi ETF, has an extremely low supply. So I think that's probably considerable to be on people's radar if they're leaning towards max risk, max reward. I am much more of a conservative person. I need to be. I have a family. I'm more conservative. And that is why I have chosen not to own something I want to own. I want to own Melon, but I don't. Uh, Gregory says even Ren dark node operator will be doing the same. Oh, yes, this is the same with dark node operators. And Digibyte, it's this risk reward analysis. It's the same with everything that we all own. You can't go in all Digibyte. Digibyte is a brilliant project. It's a technological achievement. It's a wonder. It's Bitcoin, but better. But here's the deal with Digibyte. Here's the deal with all projects. One, what's the target market for disruption? Two, how much money is involved in that target market? Three, how susceptible is that target market for disruption? The target market for Digibyte is not Bitcoin. It's not trying to disrupt Bitcoin. And that's where the risk is. It's trying to disrupt Amazon and Microsoft Cloud Services, global, decentralized, immutable, redundant record storage and asset management. And what was it? I don't even know the other companies, SAS or a whole lot of other companies come to mind, record sales, Salesforce, whatever. Point being, asset management, record storage, and asset management. And that's a massive target market that's worth Lord knows how much money. It's going to be very, very difficult to disrupt that market. But there's two things, here's a couple things that are required for this anything to happen. One, the technology needs to work. Check. Digibyte has been in testnet. I consider all this crypto stuff testnet because we don't have tens of trillions of dollars in it yet. It's proven this stuff works. Two, it needs to be financially profitable. Check. Digibyte is going to save a boatload on DevOps fees and hardware and server infrastructure and bandwidth. It's basically a self-incentivized, decentralized, self-incentivized network of redundant data storage. Oh my God. It's Amazon. It's literally Amazon Cloud, at least the data storage component. And probably a good portion of the computation, albeit, you're not going to be able to achieve the same thing that a centralized implementation does. Amazon services are very powerful and profound. But the point is, what Digibyte is meaningful and it changes everything. But you got to remember time frames. What is the time frame for the target market to be disrupted? I would argue it's probably not sooner than later. But I would also say that I don't think in time frames, that I think in terms of inevitabilities. And it is an inevitability, at least in my mind. I don't see how it cannot be an inevitability. The technology works and it's cheaper. You have over 21 different projects. So, do any of those projects produce recurring revenue? So, here, if any of those projects don't produce recurring revenue, you still got to work. Even if that one project goes 10x, still got to work. That's the point of the video, financial freedom. So to achieve financial freedom, we need recurring revenue streams. And this has been talked about in legacy financial systems all over the place. Real estate, rental properties, and REITs that produce really cool dividends because they're companies that are generating revenue and they share that with, that's the purpose of a REIT. REITs have to share the vast majority of their revenue with their shareholders. But DeFi is much more interesting. I wouldn't touch anything on the equities markets at all. I just don't trust that at all. I haven't had to work for, oh, well, okay. So Rocco says I haven't had to work for 3 years. God bless you. I want to achieve that. You've achieved what most people have not. That is financial freedom. And this is the whole point of my talks. That is a portfolio balance that clearly has worked. Not necessarily spread too thin. And see, being spread too thin or being too concentrated doesn't indicate a number, a quantity of assets to be held. These are all assessments that need to be made based on the quantity of value that each person has invested. If a person has 1,000, a person has 10,000, a person has 100,000, a person has 1,000,000, a person has 10 million, or whatever relative fiat value, $10 million worth invested, the numbers are completely different. You have to live with it. You have to go with the gut. And when you feel that gut instinct that you've achieved balance, you've done something right. Yes, Rocco says, I still have much to learn and always will. Smart man. Nobody is ever done. Ever. There's always a smarter person in the room. And even if there isn't a smarter person in the room, even a not smarter person in the room has something meaningful that can make our ideas better because they're a different perspective, and every perspective has valuable information. Always listen, at minimum, to the smartest person in the room, of which I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's smarter people. Raoul Pal, Real Vision. Those are the smartest people in the room. Everyone and anyone that has ever made their way into Real Vision, because they have won, and you want to learn from winners. Lazarus says, really enjoy the discussion. How about Hex? Hex, to my understanding, is extraordinarily inflationary, which means it's impossible for it to be sustainable, and there's no future. I wouldn't think about it for 5 seconds. I don't look at inflationary assets, period. Okay, fine. Synthetics is inflationary. Some of the proof of stakes that I'm involved with are inflationary. Blocknet's inflationary. I don't look at any product that's inflationary unless I see it potentially disrupting the crap out of a massive financial system. Synthetics is basically derivatives, commodities, futures, options markets. It could be a complete replacement. It could be the crypto Wall Street. And there's no one else doing anything even remotely comparable to the scale and at least to the progress that they've achieved. And their target inflation is 2.5%. I think it's 2023. So that is look, the U.S. government is going for 2.5%. So 50%, whatever the hell Hex is doing right now, I don't trust it one bit. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I need a pole. Got to get visual. Excuse me. So Blocknet is inflationary. It's a proof of stake, but they are literally the UTXO Oracle, just like Chainlink. And they provide decentralized SPV functionality, which no one, period, is doing what they're doing. That's it. So it is an absolutely profound project. So their inflationary component is entirely palatable and acceptable. That's it. What's XOM? I don't know it off the top of my head. Glazer says, I like your point. Let's revisit after November 19th. Sure. Hex at 3.69 predictable yield after November 19th. Oh, that's your point. All right, fine. You pique my interest, but I need to know what it does. I have to look into it. What's the point of it? If the point, so this is what happened in 2017, 2018, 2019. There were all these masternode projects. They didn't do anything. They just produced coins. The masternodes produced yield, and the proof of stake produced yield. What the fuck does it do? What's the point of it? What functionality and utility does it have? Does it disrupt a financial system? Does it disrupt an industry? Where's the value? If you disrupt Amazon, you're disrupting countless billions of dollars. If you disrupt the banking system, you're disrupting trillions of dollars. If you're disrupting lending and borrowing, you're disrupting the banking system. You're disrupting governments. So if you could think of an industry, a meaningful, valuable industry that is being disrupted by hacks, that assess the value of that industry, then sure, then you can look at it. And if you find that it's disrupting an actual real industry, take me on Twitter and I'll look at it and I'll talk about it. Have no doubt. Rocco Reed, sometimes the dumber person in the room may still, yes, and that's what I just said, that sometimes the dumber person in the room may still be worth listening to. I assure you this, the vast majority of the time, the dumber person in the room, you probably should listen to, unless it's a completely irrational train of thought, because then there's nothing productive that ever comes from such a conversation. Then it's just frustrating and painful. They may be so focused on one area, incredibly disciplined to where what they have to offer could be used. Yes, no, every opinion, every perspective is valuable. It contributes meaning and value. So that's why, unless it's an irrational conversation, in which it's just a waste of freaking time. Hex is supposed to be like bank certificates of deposit. Yeah, but bank certificates of deposit is based on lending. Who are they lending to? The bank takes a certificate of deposit because it's a fractional reserve banking system, and they lend the money. They lend it in mortgages, and those mortgages are producing yield, which go into and this is money markets and shit like that, and that's where the yield comes from because of lending. No, but a certificate of deposit unto itself doesn't mean anything. It needs to lend. If they're collecting, they need to lend in order to generate the yield. So, you listen, Aave is a certificate of deposit because I'm putting money in and I'm getting yield. I'm getting 4% on SUSD, 4% on DAI. It's a certificate of deposit. I'm lending. A certificate of deposit is lending. That's by definition what that concept is. So unless there's a lending component to it, uh, it's a little off, a little questionable in my opinion. Gregory Michael, or will have various options when their income is in BTC. Well, income is going to be diversified, and it's going to depend on the protocol and project that you're looking into. And income could be in any denomination. It's value. Value is what counts, and what counts is saving value, accumulation of value. That's what counts. And that's financial freedom, when you could accumulate value by not having to trade time for value. You got interested in Hex from looking it in place. The stakers are technically the miners and receive the reward when people stake their claims. I'll add you to tweet. I'm happy to hear about it, but unless there's a lending component, unless there's my man, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to learn more about it. I've heard about it. Everyone's heard about it. But unless there's a lending component, unless they are actually lending the deposited funds, unless there's a source of the revenue and it's not just inflationary, then that's the only way it makes sense. And if that component is there, then you literally have Aave. Aave is a certificate of deposit. Compound is a certificate of deposit. That's what it is. So it does the same thing. So at best case, does the same thing as the top DeFi lending protocols. You know, I'm happy to be shown information that shows a distinction in functionality, but that is Aave and Compound are certificates of deposit. You put money in, you get interest because they are lending it out at an interest rate higher than the interest they're paying you. And that's the basis for the banking system, the basis for the global financial system, the basis for the global leverage debt system, and the basis for the wealth creation over the last 50 years is coming off the gold standard. And that's why DeFi and the over collateralized lending protocols are so profound and meaningful and real. They're not, this is not just like vaporware. This is some serious shit that's going down. Anyway, so we've talked about financial freedom. We got a little philosophical. I love getting philosophical. So anyone who wants to talk about stuff like that, you ping me on Twitter, hit me up. And these are the ideas that I need for things to talk about. And I will talk about anything. We talked about the search for yield, which is something I've touched on in other videos, but I was happy to talk about in this one again. And what's going on with DeFi and how profound it is because it's real. It's actually the same exact system that the legacy system is, with the distinction being that it's over collateralized. So there's no systemic risk, little to no systemic risk in the event of defaults. And that's profound. That means it's done the right way. The system needs to be stable. The system needs to remain. In the case of poor risk-reward judgment by borrowers. If a company goes bankrupt, the frickin' bank shouldn't be on the hook for the debt. The company needs to be, because we need the bank to operate the rest of the damn world. So whatever they were thinking when they were crafting the policies and processes and procedures for the legacy system, somebody was dumb. It doesn't make any sense. How do you jeopardize the system to grow the system? You never want to do that. You need the system to be rock solid. And literally, that's what's happening, proven over the last couple of days and weeks and with these over-collateralized lending protocols. Anyway, if anyone has any questions, throw it in the chat. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Hit me up on Twitter. Ping me. Subscribe. Questions. I'm going to throw out some polls, but I like proactive because that means it's an actual question that someone has that is, you know me at this point. It's going to be the start of an entire verbal verbal evacuation of everything that my brain comes up with. BCH or DGB? BCH. What have I told you about the three? So Franz says BCH or DGB. DGB. But with regard to BCH, 1, what is the target market for disruption? 2, how much money is in that target market? 3, how susceptible is that target market for disruption? If that target market for disruption is Bitcoin, no, it's not going to happen. There's too much momentum. It's psychologically entrenched. That won't happen. If the target market is payments, which is kind of what folks have leaned to for BCH, then Ripple is better. Ripple is better for payments. And Ripple is another conversation that I'm very happy to talk about. Ripple is profound technology. I'll leave on this note. Now, this is what I want. Someone asked me to talk about Ripple, and I'm happy to, because I like Ripple. But here's the kicker. I see absolutely no reason for the value of XRP to go up at all based on fundamental analysis of the project. But that is a completely that's not a bad thing. That means nothing. That just means that people, investors, whatever, are piling in based on flawed logic. It's a fallacy. It's flawed logic. The technology is profound, and I think it changes the payment system for the world in profound ways. Mutually exclusive. There's no reason for the value of it to go up. In fact, every aspect of the protocol is designed to keep the value of it down to facilitate cheap payments and transfer of value. I see no reason to hold it. Where's the recurring revenue stream? So how about that? So if the only reason to hold Ripple is a price appreciation, of which I could happy to discuss why I don't, the fundamental reasons, like literally protocol property analysis, why it shouldn't appreciate in price. If that's the only reason to hold it, even considering if it increases in value, I still don't care because I want a recurring revenue stream. Because a 10x doesn't do shit for financial freedom. You need recurring revenue streams. You need to be looking at really profound masternode projects, Blocknet, Syscoin. You need to be looking at deflationary smart contract platforms, Kyber Network, inflationary but profoundly disruptive synthetics. Digibyte's a great hold. You need to be thinking recurring revenue streams. That's the only path to financial freedom, which was the point of this video. Tell me what my next video is. I'm happy to talk about Ripple. I'm happy to look into Hex. And I'm happy to talk about anything that anyone ever wants to talk about. Sunday, Father's Day. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It's always a pleasure. More to come. I'll see you soon. Peace.